I am glad to introduce the Ambassador of India in Mexico, Manpreet Vohra. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sáenz. It's wonderful to be with you and to reach through you a larger Mexican audience.
Thank you. Well, since we've seen government decisions in Mexico that affect investments and the power sector rules, tell us about the experience in India. We know that the World Economic Forum says your country is the new hotspot for renewable energy investors. Why?
You're absolutely right, Susana. India is certainly the hotspot for investment in renewable energy. A lot is happening and a lot more is on the cards. We have set a very ambitious target of producing 175 gigawatts. That's 175,000 megawatts of renewable energy by 2022, which is only 2 years from now. And in fact, our plan is to expand this to 450 gigawatts of renewable power by the year 2030. That will be 40% of our total installed electricity generation capacity. It is by far the world's largest expansion plan in renewable energy. We are a very large and developing country with 1.3 billion people, as you know, Susana. We're growing quite rapidly. So there is a ready demand for as much more electricity as can be brought onto the grid. Hence, as many more projects as investors can set up have a place and a ready market in India. India is also the hotspot today because of a very attractive policy and regulatory framework that we have set up for investments in renewable energy. These include incentives as well. The power purchase agreements that we sign, that the government signs with the producers, they ensure that the producers are able to sell their energy easily, as well as make a healthy return on the capital that they have invested. This is not difficult for the government also, because the massive scaling up that we have done, particularly in the solar sector, that has meant that the cost of generation is now at par or even lower than the cost of electricity produced through traditional power plants using cheap fossil fuels, let's say like coal. Consumers, they don't have to pay more. The producers make a profit. The additional power meets the demand that we need. It helps our economic growth. And of course, the environment does not suffer as a result. The clean energy also helps us in contributing to the global fight against climate change.
Of course. And well, we know that in Mexico, as you should know, some authorities said that renewable energies are more expensive than traditional. So how did you achieve low cost and low prices in India, as you were telling me, in renewable energies?
Our renewable energy cost today is the lowest in the entire Asia Pacific region, in fact, lower by a substantial margin. Our levelized cost of energy, as it is called, LCOE, using solar photovoltaic, which is really the largest part of our renewable energy program, that cost of energy has fallen to only $38 per megawatt hour this year, which is 14% cheaper, in fact, than coal-fired power that has traditionally, at least in India, been the cheapest source of power generation. This levelized cost of electricity, it comprises the cost of generation, the upfront capital cost, the development cost, the cost of equity, debt financing, operating and maintenance fees also. And the reason why it has become so low and so competitive now, that's the result of our rather unique model of developing large-scale solar parks, and we tender them out via competitive auctions. So this market scaling on the one hand and the competition on the other hand, they have pushed the solar costs down, as I said, to a very low level, lowest by far in the entire Asia Pacific region. And of course, it also helps us that India is blessed with a lot of sunshine.
Of course. And well, since when you started to implement these policies to boost the renewable energies?
Right. Well, let me give you some figures on what we have been doing in renewable energy. So as of the 30th of April, which is slightly less than 2 months ago, the total installed capacity for renewables in India, that's about 88 gigawatts or 88,000 megawatts. This means that almost 24%, so almost a quarter of our current total installed energy generation capacity is from renewable sources. In fact, if you include the large hydropower plants, which have of course been around for a while, the large ones, our total figure for renewable energy development capacity is 36%, so more than one third. And of the 88,000 gigawatts that I mentioned, 88 gigawatts, 88,000 megawatts that I mentioned, the most important as of today are wind power at 38 gigawatts, solar power, which is at 35 gigawatts, biopower, that accounts for another 10 gigawatts, and finally, small hydro projects, which account for 5 gigawatts. And that makes a total of 88 gigawatts as of today. The speed of growth of all this in India has also been quite impressive. Our wind energy capacity has almost doubled in just the last 4 years. Solar capacity, some of your listeners might be interested to learn, our solar generation capacity has increased by almost 14 times just in the last 5 years. And globally today, India is at the 4th position for wind power and 5th position for solar power. But then, of course, by 2022, we managed to achieve our target, particularly of solar, of 175 gigawatts just of solar. We would perhaps be the top, if not among the top in the world. So our focus on renewable energy, that started almost 40 years ago. In the early 1980s, we became the first country in the entire world to set up a specialized ministry. We used to call it the Ministry of Non-Conventional Energy Resources. Now we call it Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. That's the name of the ministry. We in India have always been determined to narrow the gap between supply of electricity and the demand for electricity. And we accepted quite a long time ago that new renewable energy sources and technologies, they have a very important role to play, besides, of course, the traditional thermal or large hydropower or even nuclear power plants. Initially, however, much of this was seen to offer only small localized solutions, say in small villages, in the rural areas. But as photovoltaic and wind turbine and other technologies have developed, we have become much more ambitious to scale these up to levels that could pump the electricity into the national grid. And of course, success breeds success, as we all know. And therefore, once it was obvious that, for example, solar plants were doing very well in India, we enhanced our target by 500% from installing, as I explained to you, 20 gigawatts by the year 2022 to installing 100 gigawatts by the year 2022. So that's been why we have scaled up so ambitiously and so rapidly.
And I think there's been a strong cooperation from the government and private sector, right?
Yes, that has been key, of course. The private sector has a huge part to play in this entire experience that I explained to you. In fact, 99%, which means almost all, 99% of our total installed generation capacity using renewable energy, other than hydro, that is by private producers. Today in India, private participation started after 2003. So that's about 17 years ago, when we deregulated the sector. The sector was deregulated by the government. And today, the policy environment is very conducive to private sector participation. For example, there are capital subsidies that the government gives. for solar plants, for rooftop solar plants, for biomass, for small hydro projects. We also offer viability gap funding if there is a viability gap in certain projects that private partners need to set up. So there's a very healthy public-private partnership, or PPP as it's called. We also, by the way, we permit 100% foreign investment, foreign ownership for renewable energy generation and distribution projects. And it is also allowed under the automatic route. So it's very easy, not just for Indian producers, private sector, but also for foreign investors to now set up renewable energy capacity in India.
Well, it's certainly a success story in India. And what do you think in this context about Mexican public policy in terms of energy and climate change?
Well, I think Mexico also has very good potential for renewable energy development, particularly solar. I believe that, I think since 2013, when the sector here in Mexico was liberalized and opened for private investment, the overall investment has risen significantly. Of course, I also understand that there is presently perhaps a rethinking about it with the government of Mexico, and what I think appears to be a renewed focus on electricity generation using fossil fuels. That's fine, of course, but I don't think that thermal power and renewable power, like for example, solar energy, I don't think they are mutually exclusive. I think there is a space for both. And in fact, I believe that there are significant advantages from pursuing both these tracks: your traditional fossil fuel power generation capacities and more of it, as well as renewable generation capacities.
So do you think that policies that have been implemented in India in these terms could work in Mexico, as we both are emerging markets?
Well, like India, Mexico also lies in the tropical zone. It enjoys abundant sunshine, just as India does. And therefore, I think the potential for generating energy, particularly from solar, but also, of course, other renewable sources, that Mexico is a large and very resource-rich country, but particularly solar. I think the potential is enormous, immense, really, for Mexico, just the same as it is for India. Similarly, both India and Mexico, we face the same challenges from pollution, from climate change. We are both committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We are both committed to helping the world meet the international global warming reduction targets and meeting the Paris Agreement goals, for example. And as I explained, a country like us, a country like India, we've already demonstrated the viability and the low cost of generating electricity from renewable sources. And India and Mexico, I see no reason why we cannot, in fact, work together in order to achieve our common national goals, as well as our international goals and obligations and commitments. India would be happy to share its experience. We would be happy to share our technologies and our products with Mexico. We've also, Susana, you might know, we have also invited Mexico to join the International Solar Alliance. Mm-hmm. This is an alliance that was launched jointly by India and France in 2015, so about 5 years ago. 121 countries, that's a large part of the world, 121 countries are already a part of this alliance. There's no financial commitment on Mexico to join the alliance. The alliance has committed to fostering investment, research and development, dissemination of solar power technologies, sharing of best practices, technologies, and science. And that will reduce the cost of solar power, make it more available, make it more affordable in all countries. And I think that would be great for emerging and developing economies, both India and Mexico.
Of course. And have you talked recently to Mexican authorities about this cooperation that you may have and also letting the private sector invest in these renewable energies?
Yes, we have been talking to the Mexican government, particularly about the promise that the International Solar Alliance offers. Uh, we have also been assisting Mexicans in a small way by training what we call solar mamas. I don't know if you are aware of this.
No.
Yes, so what we do is we select uh, elderly ladies, mamas as they call grandmothers, from rural areas only, from areas which are deprived of electricity, particularly, let's say mountain villages, etc. And we fund them to go to India and take a training course and become, as it were, solar engineers, in a few months.
Wow.
We fund it entirely. It's entirely a Government of India funded project. We pay for everything from door to door. They come back, they know how to generate using very simple technologies and equipment, generate electricity in their villages, for their homes, for their neighbors, for their community. So we are, of course, helping Mexico in that small way. But in a larger sense, we have been talking about other projects and particularly about joining the Solar Alliance. I understand that at the moment, as I said earlier, the focus seems to be more on renewing the capacities and adding the capacities of your fossil fuel sector. But as I said, the two are not mutually exclusive. There is a space for thermal power generation and there is a space for generation from solar power and other renewable technologies. And we hope, therefore, that there would be great scope between India and Mexico to cooperate in this in the future.
Well, finally, so what should we do in Mexico? As you said, we've seen that the government has been focusing on fossil energies. So how can we convince the authorities about all the benefits that we can get from renewable energies?
Well, I think it probably requires a larger national discussion on the benefits of this renewable energy source. As I said, it's not new to Mexico. You already have renewable energy projects, plants. You already have foreign investors who have invested in it in a large way. And I think perhaps a larger discussion on this so that the pros and cons are immediately available to everybody. If cost of the renewable energy power being generated currently is one of the factors, as I said, the Indian experience is available on how it is possible to reduce the cost of solar energy to the same levels, in fact, even lower levels than regular thermal energy production. So I think that kind of a larger discussion, perhaps accompanied with more science, accompanied with more experience of what is possible to be done, how it is possible to produce electricity at a cost that is still affordable, nobody pays more. I think that might help in arriving at decisions for the future.
Well, Ambassador, it was a pleasure to have you. I hope we can continue talking about these interest topics between Mexico and India. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Susana. Thank you for having me. Namaste. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.